Premier, like everyone, you would have been hearing about this mystery virus in China. A year ago today, New South Wales had its first recorded case. When did it dawn on you that this could change everything?
Pretty much that day. Our health experts were giving me advice, the Minister was giving me advice. We certainly knew that we'd be dealing with something that could be on a large scale and could be extremely concerning. And given Sydney is Australia's global city, we knew we'd also be really exposed to it.
So how on earth do you plan a response? What do you think was your first decision?
I think the first few weeks were extremely chaotic, but I knew what we had to do was have a statewide response.
So fast forward to Sunday, March the 22nd. New South Wales has recorded 97 new cases. You've announced a comprehensive shutdown ahead of a National Cabinet meeting. There were suggestions. Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, was furious, and that fury was aimed at you. What happened in that National Cabinet meeting?
Look, there's no doubt that was a tough decision on my part. But looking back, I'm really glad I made it. We needed that time to increase capacity in our health system.
Do you think you were at loggerheads with the federal government in that initial stage?
I think definitely, and the PM made that clear. I think the PM wasn't very pleased, but that's okay.
The Ruby Princess. How did New South Wales Health get it so wrong?
Well, look, that's why we asked for a comprehensive report on the issue. I read every single word, and this is the thing in a pandemic. State governments have never before been asked to look after borders or quarantine.
The outcome of the inquiry, they did say that the mistakes that were made were inexcusable and inexplicable. So what lessons have you learned from that?
Well, I think obviously the lessons we learned is, which we adjusted very quickly, was the importance of working with federal and state agencies together, because there were a number of different people who had responsibility along the way. And if you'd asked any Premier of Australia, what is your responsibility in quarantine issues prior to the pandemic, I think all of us would have been scratching our heads going, oh, I'm not sure, I'll have to look that up.
What about aged care? Yes, it falls under the federal government's jurisdiction, but New South Wales Health was involved when that outbreak happened at Newmarch House. 19 residents died. Did New South Wales Health make mistakes there too?
No, I would say that, unfortunately during a pandemic, when it's life and death, you step up even when it's not your job to step up. And sometimes when you step up, that attracts criticism because, well, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? I'm all for allowing COVID an opportunity for us to be more black and white on state versus federal responsibility.
When the death toll is rising, you've had Ruby Princess, you've had Newmarch House, you come home from work, you've worked a mammoth day. What goes through your head at night?
What goes through my head is, what are things looking like the next day in terms of cases? Are there trends I need to worry about?
But at any point privately, do you think this is just too much to bear?
No, because when you're a leader, when you're in a decision-making position, the buck stops with you, and I'm someone who always believes there's a way forward.
Now, in the middle of all of this, your leadership was threatened. You were accused of serious errors of judgment after your relationship with Darren Maguire was revealed. Is it safe to say that if New South Wales hadn't been tracking so well with COVID, you may well have been the ex-Premier of New South Wales?
Ashley, I don't delve into hypotheticals. I'm not going to pretend that was an easy time. It certainly wasn't. But I also feel that in this job, you always have to put the citizens of New South Wales first, and that's what I've always done.
But you were under pressure, and people were circling.
But as Premier, though, you're under pressure on every single issue. But did it impact my ability to lead the state? No.
You've spoken a lot about striking the right balance with managing a health crisis and an economic crisis. The state is heading towards a $100 billion debt, unemployment's at 6.4%. Do you think you've got the balance right?
I think we're definitely getting the balance as right as we can. In 3 or 4 years' time, we'll have a pathway back to being in the black, and that's what's really important. I think everybody accepts it's all hands on deck now. There's no point having a surplus if your community is losing jobs and not being healthy.
At the start, National Cabinet seemed to be such a success, but then the cracks started to appear, and it's almost as if we've reverted back to pre-federation. Why did the relationship between the states deteriorate so badly, and who is to blame?
I actually don't believe the relationship is unhealthy. It's actually positive. We have a lot of constructive debate behind closed doors. Obviously, the borders are something we disagree on, but for the vast majority of issues, there's been a lot of strong agreement.
You can't deny, though, there's been quite public bickering.
Oh, there has. Obviously, there has been, Ashley. I'm not going to deny that for a second. And I've been responsible for some of that, so I have to accept the blame.
Looking forward, a vaccine. The rollout is the responsibility of the federal government. You're responsible for how that changes our lives. What are our lives going to look like, say, 6 months after the vaccine?
Ashley, I think it's fair to say the vaccine rollout is going to be very complicated and difficult. The vaccine will be an important part of the strategy, but not the only part. We have to be, I think, really aware that it's going to be very complex and difficult with mixed results.
Premier, how close to normal are we ever going to get?
I have to say, people may disagree, but there are some aspects of COVID safe which have been welcome. I think it's given a chance for all of us to take a breather and to take stock of what's important to us. But I think that we'll find a level of normal which people will be more than comfortable with.